It was recently announced that there will be an implementation of a new national assessment dubbed Key Stage Assessment of Learning, or KAL, here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. To tell us more about this, we warmly welcome Ornella Halliday-Bacchus, who is an assessment coordinator at the Curriculum Development Unit, Teacher Resource Center, or the CDU-TRC. Welcome to Good Morning, SKN.
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning.
All right, so let's get the conversation started. Obviously, the Key Stage Assessment of Learning is earmarked to replace Test of Standards as we know it here in the Federation, and I imagine it's important to get that information out to the parents. In relation to that, what can you tell us about the key differences between the KAL and the Test of Standards?
Okay, so we know that Test of Standards was basically, every time we hear about Test of Standards, we think about promotion and grades. What class is my child going to land in high school? That was the crux of the conversation. But the difference between KAL and Test of Standards is that the KAL is only going to be used to guide instructions. And we're saying KAL, it's not going to be a full-fledged KAL this year. We're going to be doing a census pilot for KAL. So with the census pilot, we're only touching on 2 subjects this year, which is the mathematics and the language arts. So with the census pilot for KAL, we will not be giving any information as to any promotions for high school. The survey results, the results from the assessment would not be used to say who ranked the highest in the Federation or who's the top student. We are only looking to get the results so that we could determine where the students are and where we would hope for them to be in the future as they progress in their academics goals. Yeah. So it is noticeably different.
I understand. What I understand from Test of Standards, having intimate knowledge of it myself, because I worked where you work, having some intimate knowledge of it, it was not supposed to be for placement initially. And so the branding of the KAL to me makes sense. It's just now to get the buy-in for that from the public, if I'm not mistaken. And how do you orient teachers to that move that says, you know, obviously we now need to shift what we use to place our students?
Well, that's a very good question because, you know, for the whole assessment, we'll depend heavily on the teachers. The teachers are the one in the classrooms with the students, so we are expecting them to be on board. To assist with this process, we would have had a number of professional development sessions with the teachers, and they are ongoing. We continue to inform and educate the teachers. We know that the national assessment, the formats that it's going to take this year is totally different to Test of Standards. And with anything else, change, sometimes people see change as being a scary thing. So we felt the need to do these professional development sessions with the teachers so that we could guide them throughout the process. The makeup of the national assessment as well is totally different to Test of Standards. We are not only having a written component, but there's a practical component to the assessments as well. And so these things would be new to the teachers. And so we felt the need to have these development sessions with them so that they can learn and in turn share that knowledge with their students.
Is a practical component. Can you expound on that a bit?
Yes, so we are familiar, well, those of us who are familiar with the high school system, we know that they have the written component, and then we have what is called a school-based assessment, where they're given tasks to do in order to complete, and those would be weighed in addition to what they would have done on the written component to make up their final grade. So it is going to be similar with the national assessment. For language arts, the students will not be only expected to sit in a room and do a written component, but they have what we call a language arts portfolio that would be completed over time with the help of their teacher. And this portfolio would be geared towards developing the students' abilities to write pieces. So they have that aspect in order to gain some marks to make up for the national assessment grades for language arts. It is similar with the mathematics as well, because for the mathematics they have a performance-based task. And so they will be able to demonstrate what they would have learned through actually doing something.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
I can see how this would facilitate better treatment of the anxiety that goes into Test of Standards, indeed. It's interesting for me because from the assessment side of it, I imagine that, as you pointed out quite correctly, there are some key differences. In terms of reporting to the schools, obviously this information is not going to be used for placement, but how do you hope the information is going to be used by the schools in perhaps ways that it was not used re-test of standards?
Okay, and I mentioned earlier about the professional development sessions that we are having with teachers, and getting closer to the national assessment, we do have a professional development session scheduled with the teachers and the principals and also educators so that they could interpret the results that would be generated from the assessment. We are hoping that with these results, it would be able to guide the teachers with their instruction of the students. So if from the results we are seeing that 80% of your class, let's say, can read and analyze, but 20% of the class cannot, how then can you as a teacher get those 20% of the students on board in order to help them to progress? So with sharing the results from the reports with the teachers, we are hoping that they would be able to analyze those results and with the help of the Ministry of Sport and support from CDU, be able to formulate some sort of action plan in order to move forward with the students.
And I can see why that's very important, especially in terms of remediation, because what you don't want is to have a student who has difficulty, say, with addition in mathematics or multiplication in grade 3 or grade 4, and that goes unaddressed as you progress. Assessment. That is the thing that I guess gives people anxiety. But more than that, on the other side, what they don't generally see, which is where you come in as CDU-TRC, is the generation of reports, meaningful reports. I can imagine that there are parents who, having children who've gone through one test of standard, two sets of standards, you know, realizing that that child has deficiencies, but not necessarily being able to pinpoint what they are outside of percentage, now can look to the KAL and the CDU-TRC and say, hey, well, maybe this is specifically what my child needs to work, and what can you tell us about that?
And that is exactly how the reports are going to be generated for the parents, for the students, all of the stakeholders involved in the census pilot for the national assessment. There would be reports generated specifically to their expectations. And I like that you mentioned the percentage grade, because with test of standards, the only thing we got was a percentage that would determine your placement, more or less. But we are shifting away from that, and we are going to be designing reports that would, in detail, explain to the parents, explain to the students what the expectations were, what targets were set, and how the students would have performed. And we are going to give them a detail, tell them whether or not they met expectations, what areas they were strong in, what areas they would need assistance in, and all of that information would help to guide them forward.
So we understand that the KAL will be implemented in stages. Tell us about that and the subjects for the phases.
Okay, so this census pilot is only going to be focused on the language arts and the mathematics. We felt it was important to choose those two subjects because we know that numeracy and literacy are the foundation for any educational sector. If we want to determine where our students are, literacy and numeracy, I mean, it's involved in every subject area. And so that is why we chose those two areas. And as you rightfully mentioned, it is a phased approach. We hope that by next year, we would be able to introduce the other three areas, which is the social studies, the science, and a new component, the health and wellness. So it is a phased approach, and with the information that we gather from this census pilot, of course, it would inform us as to how we should move forward.
These kids are, should I say, better off? Because I would not have gotten an E in computation and maths if someone had noticed that way before. So kids, take heed.
I want to believe they're better off. I agree. Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I would think that indeed. And a major part of what you do as a staff member at the CDU-TRC is, of course, you're responsible for curriculum as well. So when we're talking about assessment, we're talking about mapping the students' performances back to the objectives on the curriculum. So the reports will be that specific?
Correct. And even with the assessment, the whole assessment, the makeup, all of the learning outcomes that would be targeted are those that would be in the curriculum. And that is another main purpose of us doing this. We want to see if the curriculum is working. I don't know if you know, but we had a new curriculum rolled out, the enhanced curriculum.
Correct.
Correct. So the assessment would be covering the learning outcomes out of that, so that we can see if there are any flaws in the new curriculum and we need to fix them, we work on them now.
I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because when we talk about the curriculum, it's important to underscore the fact that it's not a static curriculum.
Correct.
It's subject to review, and there's a lot of work that goes into determining what actually makes it into the curriculum. And then on this side of it, it's whether or not it's working, and to the extent that it's working or not. So very important work that you're doing. We want some insight. I'm sure Cortensia can't wait for this, of course, because we're talking about KAL, the grading process. What can you tell us about how the assessments will be graded?
Okay, well, it's going to be different. We have some rubrics that the teachers would be expected to use. The teachers are going to play a vital part in the grading process of these assessments, so that we could be able to maintain that they are bias-free, the grades are bias-free. And so the marking rubrics are going to be standardized across the board, so that every teacher who is grading a script or a task, they can have the same information, and every child will be treated fairly in terms of the grading. We are hoping that teachers could come together in zones and meet in a particular center. In these centers, we would have trained leaders who would be responsible for overseeing the grading process of the assessments. Initially we said that they would stay in the school and mark them, but some teachers expressed that the school environment might be too noisy, too disruptive, so we're going to bring them together in zone to assist us with the grading process.
Well, I love the way that there is this collaboration, not only with curriculum officers like yourself, but also with the schools, because really you can't do anything effectively without that level of buy-in and support from the teachers. So teachers, you're listening, you're out there, you are so important, you have no idea.
Yes.
But in addition to that, again, two-part question. Since the reports are being generated for parents as well as schools, if there is a child, for instance, who, if I were to make it real to you, has an issue with division, and I noticed that when I assessed that child the first time, that issue was there, I've generated the report, we've looked at it, but the next time the child is assessed, that problem still persists. What measures, and I know that you're not an enforcement body, believe it or not, I know that you're not, but by way of advice, or, how would you inform they're using the report to ensure that we don't see that recurring, so that by the time the child gets to high school, those problems are addressed? What can you say that parents might need to do and the schools should do?
Okay, so because the reports are going to be generated in such a way that they would provide a lot of information, I would, especially at the grade 6 level, hopefully they would not be seeing the teachers in the primary school level after they would have completed the national assessment, because they'll be moving on to first form. So on the teachers' end, in the first form teachers would be getting individual reports for the students, so they would know how to structure their lesson plans and be able to identify those deficiencies that some students may have. We know that some parents are very proactive. I'm a parent myself, and if I see that my child is struggling, I see this report that says that my child is struggling in a particular area, the first thing that comes to mind is I have to get somebody to assist my child in this area if I cannot do it myself. So we are hoping that with the reports, the parents would be able to identify their weaknesses in the students, and find someone to assist them with getting out of that. And we are depending heavily on the teachers in the grades ahead, so that they too could use the reports to assist the students with whatever weaknesses they may have.